So when Aaron Rodgers shows up in New York to talk to the Jets, clearly that means the Packers are given permission.
Absolutely.
Right? What do you read? What do you read from that?
Well, I think it's hard to imagine he's going back to Green Bay after he goes and takes a visit with another team, and we don't know. It could be the first of a series of visits, but
Right.
I can't picture a scenario where the team gives a quarterback that stature at this point in his career permission to go talk to another team, and he's coming back to them.
Right. It's tough to put that genie back in the bottle, right?
No, I mean, even with darkness for 4 days and whatever else you got to do, I don't know how you get to the place where you go, okay,
Right.
I'm going back there. I mean, he's at least earned wanting to be wanted, right?
Right. Exactly. So the fact that he's gone there means he's essentially gone, don't you think?
I think it would be shocking if you ended up back in Green Bay after this. I mean, 2 days ago you asked me, I would have said, who knows?
Right. But now that you hear he has shown up in New York and he is having direct conversations with the Jets, which must have been blessed by Green Bay.
I mean, actions speak louder than the words. At least one of them said, I don't want to be back here, or at least I want to look into what my options are. And, in the conversation of the best quarterbacks ever to play the game, now you bring him back after you say that to him.
Right.
Or he said to you, I'd like to see what else is available.
Mm-hmm.
I can't picture what conversation fixes that. And then we line up, training camp, everything's good. Let's pretend that didn't happen.
So then what's your best guess of what the conversation is between Rodgers and the Jets?
Well, I assume the Jets are just in a recruiting mode. And I assume they've at least had some preliminary conversation with the Packers. I mean, this is just too visible a thing. It's not going to go unnoticed.
Right.
And, they got players on their team that are going to be affected, mentally, psychologically by what they're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume they've at least had preliminary conversation enough to know that if they want to get a deal done, they're at least in the same ballpark. They may still have to finish the details. And they're in recruiting mode. They're trying to show him that, if you want to finish your career and have another chance at a Super Bowl, you can do it here. I mean, to me, it's a tough sell. I know those are your guys, but that's a tough sell.
Well, what makes you think it's a tough sell? And
listen, I'm very basic about this. I don't think you win a Super Bowl with a great quarterback and two dominant lines. Everything else, that's not the end of the story, but you got to start there. And I just don't see the Jets, even with a Rodgers, at the point where they're going to be able to, dominate those lines the way teams. You got to be able to prevent pressure on your quarterback, be able to get pressure on the other quarterback. If you look at the end of the Super Bowl, the teams that win it almost every year, you can say those things. They were really good at protecting their quarterback. They were really good at pressuring the quarterback. And
have a pretty darn good quarterback of their own.
That's right. Those are the three things. Now, again, you don't win the Super Bowl if you have those three things. But that's the foundation for me.
Right.
So if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I think I'm playing 2 more years. I'm not, I may be betting if I don't have any other options, but I'm not betting if I do have other options that team is in that position where they can dominate those areas that I think are crucial. And I don't think he cares about anything but winning a Super Bowl.
Sure.
So if he agrees that those are the priorities, I think it would be tough to get there in the next 2 years with the Jets.
Right. And so that aside, because he may not have another option,
right.
Certainly if we've established that you don't believe Joe Banner the option of staying put once he's kicking tires going somewhere else and the Packers say, go for it, you check it out, that you can put the genie back in the bottle. I mean, anything's possible.
Yeah, right. We've seen surprising things, but I mean, I just think about it, and listen, he's a guy that has a lot of emotions. He has a lot of opinions. I don't say that critically.
Right.
Most successful people do, quite frankly.
Yes.
But the emotion that comes with that after all these years, after what they went through last year, did the contract. I can't even picture how you start the conversation. After second thought, we'd actually like to have you come back. You had a whole year to think about this and figure it out.
Or he'd say on second thought, I'd like to come back.
Yeah, listen, if he gets to another place or places,
yes,
and he doesn't feel they can win and there's only options. But I think there's truth, and I know you said it, but others have too. I think there's some truth to the Packers kind of feeling like, it's time to get to the next phase of what the Green Bay Packers are going to be.
When I also said this too, Joe, is that, Rodgers saying, he wanted out may not have anything to do with anything other than he looks around the locker room and he doesn't know any of these kids anymore anyway, and he's aged out, if you will, and the Packers will be like, it's time we drafted this kid and now these kids have to grow together, and he may feel that sense. And other than Bakhtiari and Randall Cobb, there may not be anybody on that roster who he feels that tight with, close with. It's not the same way. It's not as fun. He doesn't want to be around as much anymore. So let's try something new. Let's try something else totally understand that. And if he does look at the Jets and he does see that there's weapons around and he does have the offensive coordinator he likes and he does have the city life that he probably would want to give a kick of a tire to, I get it. So what happens then? What do you think is your best guess, Joe Banner, former NFL executive, the conversation, the horse trading between Brian Gutekunst, GM of the Packers, and Joe Douglas, GM of the Jets is? What do you think that looks like?
Yeah, listen, I think the Packers are going to be thinking huge. And, go back to the Brett Favre experiment that you had at the Jets. But I think the Packers are going to think that they should be able to get in quite a bit for the quarterback. I mean, he still played really well last year. I'm not saying he played as well as he did, 5 years ago, or he's that same guy. But he does put you on the map as a Super Bowl contender.
So
if you sign him.
13th. So they'll ask for the 13th overall pick.
Yes,
as a starter?
and go from there. Yeah, that's what they'll ask for. I think they'll ask for a couple of ones. What do they got to lose? And then they'll back off from there.
Because would you accept that if you were Joe Douglas? Let's put you in the shoes of Joe
here's
Douglas.
The problem.
Because there's a $60 million contract apparently.
I saw you guys talking about this with Andrew Brandt, that there's what should happen, and then there's what happens. And a lot of it is driven, and you mentioned this, are you going to risk your job for the difference between paying somebody 35 and 45? Are you going to risk your job because it's the 13th pick versus it's 2 twos? And, the Jets guys are getting to the point where somebody's going to have higher expectations of what they should be achieving. They've been in place long enough. We see, go back to the Bills when they turned it around, go back to Andy when they go into Kansas City. By the end of 3 years, you should have a very good team. That's my view of it. Year one, maybe you have to take a step backwards. Year two used to be starting to move forward. By year three, it should be obvious to everybody. There shouldn't be the owner sitting there going, I'm not sure. Well, Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh are kind of at the point now where you're really starting to legitimately have some high expectations. And if they can't deliver them, they're going to find themselves in the hot seat conversation. So do you overpay for a Rodgers and you feel maybe not confident in what you have anymore? Sure you do. You're giving away picks that the next guy would have used if you didn't use them to get the right players to at least convince the owner he deserves some more time. And then that comes into every one of these decisions. When you talk about these quarterbacks, why, for the most part, we just saw it, but we generally haven't seen a middle marketplace. Because, Aikman left. It took the Cowboys 10 years to find the right next guy. I mean, we lost McNabb when I was in Philadelphia. We tried to kind of pass the torch to Vic because we'd seen this happen so many times. So if you don't anticipate, we drafted Cobb in the second round, all with the hope that we weren't going to be the team that took 5 or 10 years to find the next quarterback for the last one. Because if you're that guy, you're probably not there by the time you find that quarterback unless you're lucky enough to hit on the first try and not have a top 5 pick. That's why the Eagles went out and got Wentz a few years ago. They were like, traded a massive amount to get Wentz. And we were all sitting there going, he looks really good, but he didn't play at a top-notch school, and he didn't play that much, and he even got hurt a little bit in college. Wow, this is a big gamble. But you recover from it. But you got to have a situation where you trust that the owner really, really believes in you.
So, so unless, by the way, straight talk from Joe Banner here. So unless, basically, what you're saying, that Gutekunst asks for the moon and won't back off, and refuses to toss in any money, hardly any money, the Jets and Gutekunst will come to some sort of an agreement because this is the best option for Joe Douglas to try and win playoff games right here, right now, and at his part of his tenure of his stay with the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference is, I'm not sitting here thinking he can sign Garoppolo instead, and he's got a real good chance to go a long way. So somebody else may look at, the Baker Mayfields and Garoppolo and feel like if they're in the right situation, maybe. I don't see that. I see Rodgers as the only chance that really has a chance to dramatically elevate the team. I think it's at the point in time where he needs to do that. Now, a lot of things have to fall in place. The Packers have to be willing.
Yes.
And there is a point where he's just going to say, okay, it's too much. I've got the guy for a couple of years. It's just too much. But you can sense when a team is at the point where they're getting anxious. And I feel like it feels that way with the Jets. They feel good about what they've done so far. They feel like they're on the right track. But it's time to take a bigger step forward than the steps they've been taking so far. So for me, it's kind of a natural spot that the team and the player where they're at, could match up.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.